Hey guys, I'm glad you're able to join us for Sunday School Online again. And as a quick reminder, I want to ask you guys to make sure that you guys share this online, perhaps on social media, perhaps you email a friend, and probably you might even benefit from watching this together with a friend. Leave a comment on any question that you might have as we navigate some of the areas that we're discussing. And for those who don't remember from last week, we're kind of in a Dealing with Doubt series. Something that I hope to get through in 2 weeks, but it looks like it'll be 3 weeks. And actually, we're going to ask the same question that we asked last week today, which is, what do you do when you're struggling to believe? Last week, we saw the ways that we can help ourselves by searching honestly and humbly. We learned a lot about apologetics and how we defend our faith. But this week, we're going to learn some other helpful tools. First off, I want to urge you to keep connected when we struggle with doubts, when we deal with doubts. If you doubt in any way, I want to tell you, eternity is way too important for you to do the retreating unto ourselves thing that we often do. It's common for people to, when they battle with doubt, to kind of pull back and just kind of have their own doubts in their head. Maybe they go to church, but they're like barely there in their head. Or they don't go to church anymore. They don't connect to youth group anymore because of their doubts. Don't do that, because this is about where you're going to live for eternity. This is worth having your questions answered. I want to ask you, if you're struggling with doubt, share your doubts with safe Christians and godly pastors. And I say safe Christians, and that's for a reason, because there are some Christians that might be hurt by your doubts that are very immature, and they might have their own doubts themselves, and your doubts can actually pull them down as well. So find a mature, strong Christian that you know is going to be helpful, that you know is wise in a lot of ways. And I say godly pastors for a reason as well. Because I think in these kind of things, you really want to connect with somebody who's not antagonistic and combative to the world, but somebody who is humble and wants to really help you and is happy to shepherd you and walk with you through these hard times of doubts. I want to say, when we do connect like this and we keep connected, if you are saved, your doubts may go away or be eased when you're with the body. If you are sharing with your small group, sharing with people in youth group, if you are making your voice heard even to your pastors about this, that it's very possible, in fact, and maybe even likely, that your doubts over time will go away. There will be ease in this, and that will be a great comfort for you. If your doubts are disbelief, the kind of disbelief that the lost person have, if your doubts are revealing that you're really not saved, you should likewise connect to the church, because God actually may save you through knowledge of the truth that's going to come in these avenues. I want to give you an example of why you should stay connected. I know of a man who's a church leader in another church now, and he, because of a job where he saw some really hard things at times, he struggled majorly with doubts. He questioned his faith. And through his questions, he actually decided that he was going to stay connected to the church. He was no longer teaching in the way that he had taught before, but he was going to keep faithfully going. And in fact, he was, I think, even serving in some ways, serving as an usher type deal. And his doing so allowed him to continue to search and continue to find answers for the questions in his faith. And now he's really progressed in substantial and amazing ways. Next thing I want to tell you, if you are struggling with doubt, is consider your sin. Now, this might seem odd, but I actually recall a situation where a godly pastor, he asked somebody who brought to him that, I'm majorly struggling with doubt. He actually asked that person that shared their concerns, their doubts to them, when he started sleeping with his girlfriend. And that might seem bizarre to ask that question to somebody with doubts. But in that case, it was actually pastoral. That because sometimes doubt comes because we want to live without guilt. Sometimes people experience the most doubts when they are either living in a sin that they don't want to own up to, that they don't want to feel bad about, or maybe they are really being tempted with the sin. Maybe they are in a situation where they really want to be accepted by their friends in a way that only would come through compromising their faith. And so these doubts come because really we don't want the faith in that case. We don't want to be faithful. We don't want to cling to Jesus in these times. I do want to say very emphatically, this is not by any stretch always the case. There are certainly some times where people have doubts and they have no inner sin struggles that they're trying to hide or anything like that. Actually, I have an example, though, of the consider your sin aspect. There was a friend of mine, a friend of many years. He battled with a sin that was frowned upon more in the church than probably it should be. A sin that is really a sin, but is something that is more condemned probably than other sins. And he was a guy who was very intelligent, and he was confident in the truth of the faith. In fact, his confidence in the truth of the faith was what was keeping him from living in that sin. But over time, he kind of experienced greater temptations, and he experienced an opportunity to follow after that sin. And when he did so, when his desire became more for that sin, for that behavior, than for godliness, all of a sudden doubts kind of poke through. He stopped really believing. He came to disbelieve, and I think in a very convenient way, to support his sin choices. And I do wonder, perhaps that could be the case, that your doubts are very much tied and connected to your sin struggles. Next, I want to say we should look beyond your circumstances when we struggle with doubt. It's funny, people often bring up questions of evil in regards to doubt, in regards to disbelief. So last week we learned about the moral argument. The flip side of that is that we live in a world where bad things happen. People say bad things happen to good people. That's not true, with one exception. The only good person ever was Jesus. So bad things don't happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people in this world. But it's actually not really the case that a lot of people come to doubt God's existence because of the reality of starvation in Africa that's happening today. People actually typically lose their faith in response to a loved one's cancer, not the reality of cancer, for example. People tend to lose their faith when their family breaks down, not because of the reality of families break down. Oftentimes our doubt, it's been admitted by some prominent atheists, that difficult times in their life was what kind of led them down the road to that, which is very personal rather than sometimes being objective. That was just tied to their circumstances rather than looking beyond it. But the unfortunate thing about that actually is that our present situation really distracts us from the grand picture. So yes, it might be the case that whatever you're going through, that you are going through struggle that's intense, that is hard, that is really tough to push through. But we must keep in mind God's kingdom promises. And we must even keep in mind that God is good and that He is saving sinners. We must keep in mind that the new heavens, new earth are on their way. And the time that we experience a pain that is beyond bear, it does not negate that. In fact, when we just focus on that, it's merely a distraction from the bigger, the very real, grander picture. Actually, I think of a song by Andy Gullahorn, a singer-songwriter, it's called Grand Canyon. He talks about a picture he'd taken of the Grand Canyon. And he said the beauty goes way beyond the frame in that picture. And he kind of compares that picture to his sorrows. And that's the truth. is that the beauty of God's goodness goes way beyond the frame, and it is far past our own goodness. I want to say, by the way, if your hard times are causing your doubts, quote unquote, perhaps it'd be beneficial to look at our short series on Christians and depression. I want to say finally to this that Jesus promised us persecution and sorrow. It is kind of silly to allow our sorrows, or even the pain that comes from following Jesus, to lead us to doubt, because actually Jesus emphatically told Christians that this would happen. He said, even to those who were considering following him, that unless you're willing to take up your cross and follow me, you're unworthy of me. He promised those who followed him would have lives of pain not substantially different from the pain that he endured in his life. So the persecutions you experience, the hard times, the pain in your life, it in no way contradicts the faith. It in no way disproves the existence of God. All it actually does is really confirm what Jesus said was true. And it brings us to cling to a hope that's beyond us. And I'll also say, in looking beyond our circumstances, though we might look at personal sorrow as a reason to question God's existence, we can actually find hope, I think, in the knowledge that so many great Christians of the past and even today have been brought deeper in their relationship with Christ because of sorrow. Even I know on our own circumstances, my wife and I, and the life of my family, there were times we went through great pain, and actually God really grew us, and my faith in Jesus grew through sorrow. And I think that could be the case for you when you go through sorrow, or when you face the hypothetical sorrow that you worry about. I want to end today by reading a Bible verse that might seem odd, but I think is deeply related to this idea of doubts. 1 Corinthians 15:32. What do I gain if, humanly speaking, I fought with beasts at Ephesus? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Paul, in that passage, he said, if God doesn't exist, don't bother. And that might seem weird for those struggling with doubt, but I think it's emphatically practical. The Apostle Paul, who wrote so much in the New Testament, wasn't just there to kind of give hope for the dying and to help the morally depraved. He had no interest in following Jesus that hadn't risen from the dead. The whole reason why he was willing to lay down his life to follow Jesus was because he was confident and he knew that his Lord had risen from the dead. We can follow Jesus because he truly did rise from the dead. And Jesus is indeed coming back. Don't just eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Instead, live for eternity, because we know the truth that Jesus did rise again. And next week, we're going to learn some more about doubt, but I hope that this has been a great help to you guys in your walks with Jesus.